Ellie Grant suggested that it would be interesting to take a look at Letecia Stouch. This case is a stepmother killing her 11-year-old stepson, Gannon, then dumping his body in a suitcase. To sum it up, 11-year-old Gannon went missing and his stepmother, Latecia, claimed he'd gone to a friend's house but couldn't provide any details to the police. Surveillance footage, however, revealed her suspicious behaviour as she moved around the house and made phone calls on that day. Eventually, she was arrested and brought in for questioning, but she was brought in and brought a set of pre-written notes with her. So first of all, I'm going to give you a brief overview of the case and the offender, and then I'll discuss the behaviours during the crime that reveal psychological aspects of the offender, as well as any psychiatric or mental illnesses. As always, this isn't intended to be a diagnosis. So Latecia was born on the 4th of August 1983. When she married Gannon's father, Letecia Stouch had a daughter called Harley Hunt from her previous marriage. Albert Stauch, affectionately known as Al to those who knew him, was a member of the Colorado Army National Guard, and he had 3 children with his previous wife. They married within 1 year of meeting. Letecia was a very educated woman, and she worked as an elementary school teacher for special needs children. They were a seemingly happy family. However, there were clear signs of resentment simmering beneath the surface. On the 27th of January 2020, Latecia reported Gannon missing at 6:55 p.m. She said that he was meant to come home after being at a friend's but didn't come home. She was unable to tell the police which houses that she'd gone to knocking at looking for Gannon. She was unable to tell him Gannon's friend's address or the name of his parents. On that day, she'd stabbed Gannon 18 times before beating him across the head 4 times and shooting him in the jaw in his bedroom. Stauch then hid his body in a remote area nearby and later rented a van to drive his body to Florida, where she dumped it under a bridge. He wasn't found until March, around 3 months after he'd gone missing. Following the murder, she came up with lie after lie. Initially, she'd claimed that he'd gone to a friend's house, but she couldn't say where. And after repeated questioning and the discovery of his body, she claimed that a man had forced his way into the house, raped her and took Gannon. 3 days after Gannon went missing, she gave an interview to KKTV saying that deputies had threatened to shoot her and to put her 17-year-old daughter in handcuffs. In the clip that I watched on YouTube, it only shows her back, so I wasn't able to read any of her body language. However, the fact that she is an intelligent woman means that she would have probably have thought about that first and asked for her face not to be shown. In text messages, detectives said that she'd told her husband that Gannon had been up most of Sunday evening with a stomach problem and that she would give an excuse at work to stay with him. In an affidavit, police said that Latecia sent her employer a text message that morning saying that her stepfather had been hit and killed in a car and that she'd be unable to come to work that day. Letecia's stepdaughter, Lena, returned home at 3:15 p.m. Letecia told her that Gannon was asleep in his room and that she couldn't go and see him. Letecia sent Lena outside to play until Harley, her sister, had picked her up at 4:42. Letecia sent a text to Harley asking for carpet cleaner, trash bags and baking soda shortly after Harley picked up Lena. Police said in the affidavit that they believe that these items were used to clean up the crime scene. Police hypothesised that after killing Gannon, Letecia moved his body through the house and into her Volkswagen Tiguan in the garage. Investigators found Gannon's blood in the garage near the area where the vehicle's rear hatch would open. Prosecutors say that she killed Gannon because she was resentful about being used as a glorified babysitter. On her phone, she'd previously Googled the phrase, "I hate my stepson," and "Can Nintendo find my Switch?" She was arrested 3 months after his disappearance. She was charged with murder of a child under 12 years of age by a person in position of trust, child abuse resulting in death, and tampering with a dead body. However, his body wasn't found until a few months later. Following an autopsy, police said that they found physical evidence that supports that a violent event had occurred in his bedroom, which caused bloodshed, including blood spatter on the walls and enough blood loss to stain the mattress, soak through the carpet and the carpet pad, and stain the concrete below his bed. She was invited to an interview with police. To that interview, she brought notepads with her with information that she'd previously written out, and asked at several points if she could refer to her notes. During the interview, Letecia told detectives that she'd been held at gunpoint and raped by a man that she knew as Eduardo, and that Gannon had been abducted by the suspect after he'd raped her. Letecia claimed that during the attack that she'd hit her head and blacked out, but investigators noted that there were no injuries. Letecia told investigators that Gannon jumped on Eduardo's back and that Eduardo was able to throw Gannon off his back and across the room. Letecia told police that after the attack, she cleaned up the areas where the attack had happened. At this point, she knew that the evidence was building up against her. She dealt with this by claiming that she had chest pains and was taken to the hospital. She left the hospital without telling the officers who were waiting there for her. Police put a tracking device on her car, and she drove to the point where she dropped Gannon's body off, probably to check that his body was still hidden. Gannon's body was discovered later. Now, hearing this new and evolved story as it came around, if there were a home invader, they wouldn't have risked her escaping by going out to greet her daughter. She refused to be examined and have DNA collected. CCTV showed the stepdaughter coming home, but no footage of a Hispanic man who she claimed was Eduardo. When investigators obtained records from Stauch's home alarm company, they found that the home's back door was opened and closed 10 times during the time period that Letecia had said that she was being attacked and held. Phone records show phone activity and texts at the time that she claimed she was being raped. Stauch claimed that she'd previously met this Eduardo as Gannon had spilled candle wax on his carpet. She said that she drove around the neighbourhood looking for workmen. Eduardo had agreed to fix the missing piece of carpet the following day. The court affidavit stated Letecia lied on multiple occasions, has abnormal, unexplained behaviour such as renting a rental car, disconnecting her mobile from the cellular network for extended periods of time, the false reporting of an alleged rape, abnormal patterns of travel, a continuous evolving story with material changes in facts and circumstances, and has since left the state of Colorado. During the trial, her attorneys claimed that childhood trauma led to a major psychotic break. He said that she had dissociative identity disorder and experienced both physical and sexual abuse at the hands of her mother's lovers while she was growing up. He said that she believed she was killing the demons when she hurt Gannon. Al Stauch testified that Letecia Stouch made things up in order to manipulate the relationship. That included her making up 2 burglary claims in 2019. She claimed that a squatter had gotten into their home, although no one was ever found. She later admitted to making up those break-ins, he testified. Most of the stories that she told were not accurate, he said. Stauch previously claimed that Gannon had hit out at her. To the recollection of the dad, Al Stauch, that allegation involved his son Gannon threatening Letecia with a knife or coming at her with a knife. The father said that he'd never witnessed anything like that, and also said that he saw no evidence of Gannon having it out for Letecia. In an attempt to catch her in a lie, Stauch had agreed to work with FBI agents and have a recorded phone conversation. In the call, which took place before Gannon's body was found, Letecia repeatedly denied having any involvement in his disappearance. She said, "My mind was completely effing gone. I tried, I didn't know what was going on. All of it was a blur. It was like I was in some Lifetime movie." She then accused her husband of treating her like a criminal, saying, "I can't believe you'd ask me this. If you think Gannon's dead, that's horrible. What's wrong with you?" she's heard saying in that recording. Leticia's side claimed that she'd suffered from dissociative identity disorder and was insane when she allegedly killed Gannon. The prosecution claimed that Stauch doesn't suffer from dissociative identity disorder and that she was sane when she allegedly killed Gannon, and that she highly suspects that Stauch had been faking her symptoms entirely. Max Wachtel, who's a forensic psychologist, said that it was actually incredibly common to have two experts in court to have a difference of opinion on a sanity report in a criminal case, such as with Letecia Stouch. Wachtel said, "It comes down to a credibility contest. Which expert does the jury believe more? Usually you find two credible experts who will conclude differently on sanity. What makes the Stauch case much more abnormal is the major differences at which the two experts agree." He explained that usually when sanity is brought up in a criminal case, it's because there is a clear and well-documented history of severe mental illness within the defendant, and that the existence of the mental illness is not disputed by the prosecution or its expert. At court, Dr. Dorothy Lewis testified that she had diagnosed Stauch with dissociative identity disorder and that she was one of the most mentally ill people that she'd ever met, and that she actually spoke to one of her alleged personalities. Now, Lewis claimed that during one of her interviews, Stauch had taken on the Maria personality, which Stauch claimed was the one who killed Gannon in an interview with Torres, and spoke with a Russian accent. I watched the footage of Dr. Lewis's testimony, and it's painful to watch. She doesn't appear to have any evidence to support her diagnosis. She doesn't answer any questions clearly. She gives a long narrative about the condition in general. Throughout, she can't give a point towards any evidence that she used to arrive at a diagnosis. And this doctor was a 90-year-old woman, and why use a 90-year-old woman anyway? Surely there are much younger experts who have a much sharper mind that they could have used. Lewis, who said that she didn't speak with any of Stauch's family members, testified that during cross-examination that the importance of what the family say is less relevant to her because they have reasons not to be entirely truthful. There was no evidence presented to support the diagnosis. Wachtel, the forensic psychologist that I'd mentioned earlier, explained that often in cases where sanity is the defence, there will be major evidence to show that the defendant has a documented history of mental illness before the incident. A doctor diagnosed Stauch with anxiety in 2019 and said that she didn't believe that Stauch suffered from any severe mental illnesses either time that they met, less than 2 months before Stauch killed Gannon. She said, "If I had concerns about her, I would have placed her on a 72-hour hold." Dr. Torres spoke on behalf of the prosecution and said that one of the key reasons she didn't diagnose dissociative identity disorder was the lack of any of Stauch's family members claiming they knew of her multiple personalities. She talked about having this mental illness since she was 16 years old, and it's never documented or repeated anywhere. Torres said that there was a lack of corroborating evidence, and I would agree with that from what I've seen. This interview about sanity and competency was given by the prosecution was vastly different than the one that Dr. Lewis gave. She speaks clearly. She was able to answer questions directly. She was able to point to exact moments and pieces of information that were used to form her evaluation. From a psychological point of view, Letecia Stouch is a woman who's dissatisfied in her marriage. She shows clear signs of resentment for being an unpaid babysitter for his children. She sets up the crime quite tidily. She texts her husband a picture of him laying in bed, saying that he's sick. She tells him that Gannon's been up most of Sunday evening with a stomach problem and that she would give an excuse at work to stay with him. Letecia informed Gannon's school that he'd be absent. The excuse that she gave to her employer was that her stepfather had been hit by a car and killed and that she'd be unable to come to work that day. Now, I'm sure that you will agree with me that this is an extreme excuse. She could have given any excuse, but she chose that one. To me, this sounds like she wanted people to feel sorry for her. She wanted the attention. Then she tells Al she's going for a hike, and this sets up the scene for her to be able to say that he was there when she left and he was gone when she got back. And from what we know, there are several psychological factors that could be driving her behaviour. She's clearly manipulative and she lies with ease, and she expects others to believe her and not to challenge her. Letecia's strong desire for attention and her ability to maintain a false image despite overwhelming evidence against her points to the presence of narcissistic traits. Narcissistic individuals often exhibit an inflated sense of self-importance, constant need for admiration, a lack of empathy for other people. She often exhibits a lack of empathy, a disregard for the rights of others, and a willingness to engage in manipulative and violent behaviour. The only person that she seems concerned about during the time period where he'd gone missing and he was found, or that she was proved to be the murderer, was of herself and how others seen or treat her. Her narrative was dynamic, and she very easily adapted her story as she was presented with new pieces of evidence. Although she changes her story several times, the underlying narrative is always centred around her being the victim. In the television interview that she gave, she faces away from the camera, which is unusual. She says that people need to stop blaming her and making false accusations. She claims that her family were getting death threats. With all of her behaviour, she's saying, look at how people are treating me. I'm the distraught do-gooder who was taking care of this child because his mother didn't want to. She's saying that she was then the victim of rape. This premise of being the victim in all of this seems to be very central to her identity. Some of her behaviour also reflects traits of a condition called Munchausen by proxy. This is where a caregiver hurts children so that people feel sorry for them. She says, I took care of him in our home because his mother didn't want to. Letecia's history of fabricating stories, such as the alleged rape and home invasion, also reflects behaviours that are consistent with Munchausen syndrome or factitious disorder. Individuals with these conditions intentionally feign illness, victimhood, or psychological distress to gain attention, sympathy, or control over other people. In my personal opinion, she isn't fully detached from reality, and she interacts well and talks about the differences between right and wrong. There doesn't appear to be any evidence of a psychotic break and dissociative identity disorder. Letecia appeared to be resentful of having to take care of her husband's children when he was working away. She sets the scene that morning and sent photos and texts to match her story. She stabbed Gannon 18 times before beating him across the head and shooting him in his jaw in his bedroom. She then hid his body in a suitcase and dumped it, and he wasn't found until 3 months later. And following that murder, she did come up with lie after lie. She continuously changes her story, but always portrays herself as the victim. When the overwhelming evidence proved that she killed Gannon, She admits that she did, but claims it was a psychotic break. Dr. Dorothy Lewis testified that she diagnosed Stauch with dissociative identity disorder, and in that court appearance she didn't answer any questions very clearly at all. She gives a long narrative about the condition in general, and throughout she can't give any evidence that she's used to arrive at a diagnosis. She said that she didn't speak to any of the family members to arrive at the diagnosis because she said what the family says is less relevant to her because they've got reasons to not be entirely truthful. As a recap then, there are several psychological factors that could be driving her behaviour. She's clearly manipulative and lies with ease. She expects others to believe her and to not challenge her. She often exhibits a lack of empathy, a disregard for the rights of others, and a willingness to engage in manipulative and violent behaviour. The only person that she seems to be concerned about during that whole time period is herself, how people see her and how they treat her. Her narrative was dynamic and she did easily adapt her story as she was presented with the new evidence in the case. But as she changed her story, the underlying narrative always centred around her being the victim. With all of her behaviour, she's saying, look at how people are treating me. I'm the distraught do-gooder who was taking care of this child because the mother didn't want to. What she's saying is, I was the victim of rape. She exhibits traits of Munchausen by proxy. Letecia's history of fabricating stories, such as the alleged rape and the home invasion, also reflect behaviours that are consistent with Munchausen syndrome or factitious disorder. Now, it's your turn to join the conversation. I'd appreciate if you could like, comment, subscribe to the channel and stay up to date with the latest crime cases and delve into the minds of the most perplexing criminals with me. Share your thoughts, theories and experiences relating to this case in the comments below. Can't wait to read them. Thanks for listening then. Bye for now.